When it comes to Zebec, there's something that I would actually find fascinating news for it right now. Even though nothing I say is financial advice, what do I mean by this? Zebec cards not too long ago, they made a post on X and they said that we're back on the pitch. It says that Zebec returns to UEFA this season. It's spelled like UEFA. And it says that, again, it's returning to UEFA this season, bigger, bolder, and ready to onboard even more global communities. Now, it says that they're now bringing cards, like if we take a look at further in the post, it says that again, now bringing cards and stablecoins to football's biggest stage. And again, this is about soccer, right? But then, it's also football, known as like internationally. But yeah, besides that point, when I take a look at why do I think it's massive, even though I am not like a big soccer fan, like I don't watch soccer, but I know some things a little bit because I did some research about this and I saw that when it comes to you know, the UEFA Champions League, right? Back in May, I saw an article that it said that when it comes to, the UEFA Champions League semifinal between Inter Milan and Barcelona on CBS, it attracted an average of around 1.2 million viewers, setting a US record. So I think that's pretty massive, right? I mean, again, I don't watch soccer. However, those are some very impressive figures right there. Not to mention, if I take a look at UEFA, it stands for supposedly the Union of European Football Associations and the governing body of football in Europe. So I think that is pretty awesome. And I even take a look at the UEFA, table right now. It does say that Aston Villa is top 5. Now I've heard about Aston Villa before. It's pretty famous soccer team. So yeah, I think this is very awesome because I think this, if anything, kind of brings more attention to something like Zebec, right? Brings more just notoriety, I think, when it comes to the project overall. I get it. Sometimes a lot of my friends like to say, oh, Zebec, they're not really doing much advertising. But again, if they're going back to the pitch, quite essentially, like what the post says, right? And returning to UEFA this season, that is really, I think, a major victory when it comes to Zebec. But again, only time will tell, but I like it nonetheless. Now, when it comes to Zebec as well, people like to say, oh, but if people take a look at that, they're not going to know what it is. I'm totally aware of that. But a lot of advertisements I see, sometimes I also don't even really know what it does. But then if it's kind of cool enough, if it's interesting enough, if it's put in the right place, sometimes I do search it up, right? Sometimes I'm like, okay, what is this? So maybe that could do that when it comes to Zebec. Now, are people watching, again, let's say, for instance, UEFA Champions League semifinal? Are they necessarily going to be caring about Zebec's focus on payrolls or, global trade and finance or payments or something like that? Who knows? But we just never know, right? I mean, maybe someone out there is the head of an enterprise looking to find a new partnership when it comes to payrolls or let's say, AI-based PayFi and they see something like Zebec. Maybe that could help, right? So I think that it's pretty good nonetheless. It's pretty interesting because kind of, again, the main complaint that I see a lot of people sometimes talk about when it comes to Zebec is that they don't really advertise enough. So I think this right here is just going to bring more attention really as to what Zebec is doing overall. And when it comes to the idea of 10 cents, right, when it comes to ZBCN, it is still something I'm thinking about, even though nothing I say is financial advice, because Zebec just keeps kind of pushing the envelope here, right? Because when it comes to Zebec cards, we've seen what they've done with Bonk, right, which is Solana-based meme coin. We've seen what Zebec has done with Algorand, for instance. Algorand is a, very famous layer 1 blockchain. So then now that they're kind of entering into that more so advertising phase, the way you take a look at it, not really a phase maybe, but this is just my kind of point of view because I don't really view Zebec as something kind of advertising usually. So yeah, I would kind of consider that. But kind of entering that, and then we take a look at how Zebec is actually fundamentally improving. Like, for instance, acquiring GateKnox, being focused on compliance through that, acquiring Science Card UK, and kind of entering the education market through that. It's just, I think, perfect timing, really, when it comes to Zebec, because now they're fundamentally better than before. And also on top of that as well, 10 cents is around a 19x from here, and the market cap at that point would be around 9 billion. Considering current circulating supply. I just don't think it seems that ridiculous. I mean, when I take a look at, XRP not too long ago reaching a market cap of around 200 billion, 9 billion isn't even 5% of 200 billion. But besides that, when I take a look at Zebec, something that I also want to mention actually regarding, what they're going to do, let's say with UEFA, hopefully, right? Is that when it comes to Zebec cards, it is powered by MasterCard. So I think that is just pretty impressive. I get it. When it comes to the scale of what they're going to do in this, it really depends because, again, saying they're going to be back on the pitch, they return to the UEFA this season. I mean, yeah, again, what attention will it bring? Who knows? But I still like it nonetheless. Now, when I take a look at back in February, right? Now, this is quite a while back ago, but then there was a post, and it was like Zebec Network is becoming a household name around the world with Tier 1 football sponsorships and digital screens across financial capitals like New York and London. So they were already kind of doing this back in February, but because at that time, I feel like Zebec didn't really have much attention. It wasn't really valued that much, right? But then now again, fundamentally it's becoming better. I like the phase right now a lot better than before. Before, I guess in February they did kind of have that phase as well when it comes to that advertising a little bit, arguably. But yeah, I think this is just a better phase overall because fundamentally I think it's improved. However, when I take a look at Zebec just overall, what I find even more fascinating is that when it comes to the payroll side of things is at least doing something. The last monthly volume report that I saw when it comes to Zebec, it had over 200 payroll enterprise clients. So when some of my friends out there say, oh, they're not really caring about payrolls, I think that kind of begs to differ, right? When it comes to that statistic, I would say. But then ultimately, all I'm doing right now is just staying patient, holding, and just waiting because, to me, that's the only thing I can do. I am a fan of Zebec. I like what it's doing fundamentally. I like the Solana aspect when it comes to it. I like how Circle is supposedly one of the backers when it comes to Zebec. Circle is the creator of USDC, the stablecoin, and also, not to mention, Solana Ventures, which is supposedly another backer when it comes to Zebec. I'm just liking the whole vibe overall when it comes to it. But yeah, only time will tell. Now, the way you take a look at it is that even though ZBCN has had a pretty okay recovery as of late, I feel like the journey may be still kind of a ways away because, first of all, I don't think I've seen an altcoin season during this cycle. And also, ZBCN not too long ago, to go to the price of 10 cents was like around 11x from here. So it's still ways away again from where it is even as of right now, but I'm just still staying patient because I feel like ZBCN has done so impressively, right, as of late. With altcoin season had a really good rally. And then it had a pullback, but then the recovery has been pretty amazing. I mean, projects out there that are more established, with more fans, they sometimes are kind of not really able to have that price recovery, right? But then ZBCN, not having mainstream attention, not having that kind of, overall popularity in the grand scheme of things, holding up pretty strong. The amount of holders is also holding up pretty strong. And the recovery too, I mean, wow. ZBCN is really just surprising me in a good way. I'm not telling them to do anything, by the way, when it comes to, ZBCN, but I like what I'm seeing so far, so I'm still going to be staying patient, just dollar cost averaging, holding, and just waiting. However, real quick, I just wanted to make this video to just kind of showcase how I find what Zebec cards announced on X as a pretty fascinating thing in my perspective and how I'd actually consider it pretty fascinating news. But yeah, even besides that, I'm just going to stay patient, and that's about it. And feel free to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. I'd greatly appreciate it. It's only the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.